Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, thank you so very much for being a listener to the Public Relations Review podcast. I would really appreciate your leaving a review of the podcast. Let me know what you think. To make it easy, you can go directly to the podcast website, and that is publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can go directly to the review page to leave your review. So let me know what you think of the podcast. And again, thank you so very, very much for being a listener.
Welcome to the multiple award-winning Public Relations Review podcast, ranked by Apple among the top 1% of podcasts worldwide. Each episode features distinguished American and international guests who explore a wide range of public relations topics, including AI, digital trends, crisis communications, storytelling, media relations, and more. Our conversations bring together seasoned professionals, business leaders, authors, academics, and government officials and others to share their insights and expertise. Now, here is your host and producer, Peter Woolfolk.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Now, a question for my audience. How familiar are you with the pay-for-performance compensation agreements? And how about utilizing a remote workforce? Well, my guest today was a pioneer in the pay-for-performance compensation arrangements and also among the first in the industry to implement the remote workforce concept. His career includes a stint as a vice president with Burson Marsteller. He later launched his own firm, Inc. Incorporated Public Relations in Overland Park, Kansas. He recently passed the reins of that company to senior colleagues. Now, in early 2022, his book, It's the Media Stupid, PR Without the BS, was released. He later launched Grove & Company, which leverages his extensive marketing and communications experience for small to medium-sized companies. So joining me today from Lawrence, Kansas, is entrepreneur Dick Grove. Dick, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Peter. I appreciate the invite.
Well, let's get started this now. As an experienced pioneer for pay-for-performance compensation in public relations, how would you judge this compensation system? What value would you to it?
Well, I think it works. It's very effective. It's very effective for small and startups and smaller firms that need to break into the media and to get media attention. And the reason it is because pay-for-performance, in effect, is self-disciplining in terms of how it goes after the media and how it has to, in effect, listen to the media first. And I say that because if you're being paid only if you actually get coverage in the media, then you've got to make sure you have to be very careful in terms of the pitches you make and the fact that they are where there is a great incidence of the media receiving that pitch. You don't have the luxury of being paid by the hour or on a retainer where you can make 50 pitches to somebody and hope something sticks. You've got to make sure that the pitch you make and the coverage and what you're saying to the media gains interest very quickly and on a much higher percentage than if you were paid by the hour retainer. So that's one of the first things. To make it work also, you really have to have people that understand the media working for you. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the remote workforce. Remote workforce and pay-for-performance, in my case, absolutely went hand in hand. Because when I first started this, I used to think to myself, and I did come out of Burson Marsteller and a couple of other major firms, as well as on the corporate side. And what I really found over the years was that PR firms get fired for a lot of reasons. But they get hired for a lot of reasons. They usually get fired for one, okay, more than any other. That's lack of coverage, okay? Ultimately, it comes down to, are you getting me coverage? And so I created this with the idea of what is the greatest chance of getting coverage for our clients? And I thought, okay, the best thing you can do, the first thing you need to do is hire people directly out of the media to do the pitching. Because the people that are in the media, they understand what people in the media need and what they want and what they look for and what are their pet peeves and all of that. again, I stress as much as I did in the book you mentioned, it's the media stupid. I script perfectly. I mean, I script very much in terms of how media plays the role, both in my case, remote working, but also in pay for performance. I say hiring people because the remote work came. I realized that if I wanted really good people that were coming out of the media and they wanted to be PR people, they wanted to pitch and place, two things had to happen. One, I wanted to find people that were really qualified, which meant they were probably going to be relatively expensive. Secondly, that probably they're going to come out of metro areas to a great degree. Mm-hmm. And that meant they're probably having to commute. And commuting is not fun, as you know, whether it be in Washington, D.C., or whether it be in New York, or whether it be in San Francisco.
Right.
So by offering them the opportunity, I said, I want your talent, your contacts to a degree, and I'll explain that. But what I really wanted was your effort, your talent, and your skill and your experience. And in return, what I'll do is I'll allow you to work from home. I don't care whether you're in a high-rise building. I don't care whether you're in a private office or anything else. And I want the ability to have you work from home so you can do it. Two things happened from that. One was the fact that by working from home and doing that, as I mentioned earlier, I had to pay a little more, but I had people work on a very high commission basis, because when you're working on pay for performance, you're in effect working on commission from your client. Mm-hmm. You have to deliver in order to be paid. Well, the same thing happened with my people. What I said to them, the people that work for me, was, I'll pay you a very high commission, okay? But in effect, you're either going to have a very low retainer or no retainer whatsoever. I'm buying you for your skill. So you've got to join me in that process of working on a commission basis. If you're willing to do that, if you're confident in your skill and your ability to do that, the pay will be commensurate with your ability to do that. That was very important, I think, in terms of getting people to work for me under that skill. So managing remote, what you have to do is, of course, my people tended to be more on the mature side. I wasn't hiring people right out of college. Mm-hmm. I was hiring people that were, in effect, experienced journalists. There were a few what I'd call experienced publicists, but most were experienced journalists.
Right.
So if they're going to join the dark, as we used to say in the old days, the dark side of PR from being a journalist, the compensation had to be good to do that. The freedom meant a lot. Most of my people are people that really highly competitive, but enjoyed having that freedom of not having to go into an office, of not having somebody leaning over their shoulder as to what are you doing now, or in an hourly or retainer-based situation, have somebody above them saying, "Are you billable today? Mm-hmm. Are you putting in enough hours?" To me, that's counterintuitive to making somebody be very productive.
Right.
So, all of those played a role into finding one, very good people, very talented people, very competitive people, which you had to be if you were going to be working under a commission basis. You had to enjoy that competition. But the key thing is, even when you work remotely. Oh, and by the way, the other key thing from my standpoint as a businessman running a PR firm is that by having people work remotely, I was able to reduce my overhead dramatically. Mm-hmm. Okay. And by reducing, I'm not paying for lots of high-rise office buildings. What I'm paying for is results. So what I said was it reduced the overhead dramatically. That helped in the ability to offer my clients a different kind of financial structure. What I told them, and what it was in fact true, was I was sharing in the financial risk. Mm-hmm. Because, and that made a big difference in terms of how you can manage it from a cost standpoint, is to do it that way. But I'd say that one of the really key things of working remotely is you still have to be in touch. It sounds like I'm going against my own thoughts, but I'm a big believer on face-to-face meetings. I'm a big believer on that, at least some personal touch.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things I always used to do with people, when we first started with a client, I would bring 2 or 3 of those people that were going to be working on that account, and we would go to what we called an orientation meeting.
Right.
So the first, or launch meeting, whatever you want to call it, that was always done in person, which I had the client pay for. And the idea was, I want to touch, feel, see the product. I want to see the human beings. I want my people that were working for me to see and touch and feel what it is.
Right.
Then they can go back to their remote office and work. But now they have a first-person understanding of what they're going to be working on. And periodically we would have gatherings where I would bring the people in, where we would, more camaraderie than anything, but to let everybody know they were part of a real team. They weren't just sitting out in Austin or Denver or New York by themselves, or Westchester. They were part of an actual team. So that's all part of, it's kind of an odd, it's not as easy, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not as easy as just hiring somebody and say, you can work from home, and I'll send you some assignments, and when you do them, you'll get paid. You're not going to get the same kind of productivity if they feel like they're a part of an entity. Even if they're freelancers, even if they're independent contractors, everybody wants to feel like they're a part of a team. And so I wanted to make sure that was the case. And what did the client get? The client got a high level of success because, one, the people out there were experienced. They knew how to pitch a story. They knew how to find the news hook in a story, which is very big. So we spent a lot of time. And by the way, we would have at least once weekly, we would all get together on the phone and have these were before Zooms and so forth, but we would all get together on the phone, share our stories sometimes. And the people then became a network, not individuals. They were a network that could share their leads, their contacts, and help each other on individual clients and so forth. So it's much more simple. I guess it's much more complex than most people would look at and say, okay, pay for performance, okay, remote working. It was, but it was also a different kind of, it was a network of really good people working very hard and producing, most importantly, coverage for the client at a very high percentage rate. What I used to say is that, we probably, a pitch ratio to placement was probably 300. So, meaning if you're hitting 300, you're hitting damn good. Okay.
Let me add something.
I'd say
right quick, because what you've mentioned is, as a matter of fact, we actually did an episode a couple of months back where a PR firm did a survey of how companies would decide how they would judge an effective public relations firm. And what they looked at was the value for the money, or what came back to them was value for the money. How do we actually know that we're getting the services that we want and that we're paying for? So to hear you say that the pay for performance piece was put together, and people might still be doing that under some circumstances, but it is important because public relations can be, depending upon who you're talking to, can be a nuanced thing. What does that mean? What are we getting? How do we judge our value? How do we judge the success of the people that we're hiring to do what we want them to do? So pay performance seems like it should be undertaken in some format, just universally.
Well, of course, I thought that. I thought that from the very beginning that it ought to be. But I think what we've tried to do, and what I still try and do, is that you, in that initial launch meeting or orientation meeting that I mentioned, and all the way down, and even before we started any kind of pitch for a client, we got to know the client. It wasn't just give us something. If we get some coverage, we'll send you a bill. It was never that. What we did was we spent time with the client, learning what they needed, what their marketing goals were, what their sales goals were, and what their overall goal was, the personalities, the product, etc. And then we determined a media target list that made sense for them. Now, they usually would say, well, I want to be in Forbes, or I want to be in Fortune, or whatever. I want to be in Wired, and so on. Yes, but maybe that's not the best place for you now that we've looked at it. And so we would talk to them, and we would develop, in conjunction with the client, a target list with prices associated with various size placements within those that we had to earn. Again, it's all earned media, not paid media.
Right.
We had to earn it by making a pitch that made sense, by gaining interest from the reporter, producer, editor, etc., and gaining eventually to get that placement. Sometimes it would happen in a week. Sometimes it would happen in a year and a half. Okay. I mean, for example, I always use this as an example. CBS this morning, CBS Sunday morning, which is a real get, along with like the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
Okay. It took a year and a half to get a placement for one of our clients on CBS this morning. CBS Sunday morning. You had to work closely with the reporter, with the producer. I mean, you had to constantly receive new questions. You had to go back to the client and get those answers. It's a real process. I don't think most people on the outside, and most clients don't, understand that PR and public relations, or media relations, probably being very precise, is a process. It's a hard, tough slog. And when you get it, it's great. But if you don't, it's terrible. But the idea of value also, Peter, it became a thing much more these days, I think, that what am I getting for that? You're charging me whatever,
right.
$10,000 for a placement in the Wall Street Journal. I got that. You got me a story. It's a good story. Great. My phone didn't ring very much.
Right.
So therefore, is it really worth that? What I used to say, and before we ever started, I said, that's going to be much of it's going to be up to you, Mr. Client. Okay. My people are going to work their butts off to get you in there. They're going to get you a platform to tell your story. That's what the media is. It's a platform to tell your story. If that story doesn't resonate, that's really not the PR firm's problem.
Right.
That's not their fault.
I agree.
And that's very hard for a client to understand, as you can imagine, And I had another saying, and forgive me, I don't mean to be crude, but we had another saying that was, the media is a little bit like, let me say, a girls working in the night. Okay, that once the service is delivered, it loses all value. It's one of the incredible things that somebody will do anything, pay anything to get themselves on the cover of Wired magazine, for example, or Forbes. You get that, and all of a sudden you've got a client that's saying, geez, that's not worth $15,000. So it's something, again, it's pay-for performance is not, it's not easy because you're dealing with a lot of client expectations too. So it takes some hand-holding, it takes some education, and it can be difficult at times. But it also can be very satisfying.
Well, let me add something to this. That part of that is, when they get the story, I mean, who is it going to be addressed to, and what can the readers, if you will, get out of it? Is there something of value to the reader? So one of the things that, you look at is who is your audience for these things, and how valuable is this information going to be to them, or not valuable? So I think, there's a responsibility on both sides. You're getting a story, but also the people who want the story to be published have to have something to offer to those people that they're reaching.
Of course. And that's where much of that is the client. It's going to be depending on the client. And much of it, and part of it is going to be you as a professional communicator or a professional media relations person to say, what I'm going to tell you is what's going to resonate, what you need. It's a wonderful mix,
right?
Okay,
mm-hmm.
of what the client needs to say and to whom, and the media that will receive it and run some kind of story,
right?
Whether it be broadcast, print, online, etc. So it's a mix of that, and it's got to be a blend that will work. You can't. I have had clients that said, "Get me in the Wall Street Journal. I only want to be in the Wall Street Journal."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, I don't know if your story's worth being in the Wall Street
There we
Journal."
go. That's my point.
Yeah. And so it's a matter of, one, educating and the client a lot. It's also, but if you're a pro and you've been around this business, you know what's going to resonate with the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
You know who
mm-hmm.
their audience is primarily. And that's why part of that process in the very beginning is determining what kind of stories you're going to tell. And part of which we're going to find later on, but the ones that initially you start with when you begin with a client, what are those stories and how are they going to resonate? And what media is the best way to reach that audience that you're wanting to reach, Mr. Client?
Absolutely.
And it may not be, I don't know, the Wall Street Journal. It may be Cat Fancy Daily,
mm-hmm.
And you've got to be able to educate them. But I'll go all the way back to what I was talking before. Pay for performance is a means, and it's a very good means for PR in my mind. Okay, it's had a bad rap, and including, and forgive me, I know you're a member in good standing with PRSA. PRSA over the years has had a real hard time understanding pay for performance and accepting it. They've called us, ambulance chasers. They constantly, it's not paying the media to run a story.
Mm-hmm.
It's having the client pay you to get the story, get the media to take your story. And it's had a bad rap. I've debated PRSA over the years, not lately, but in my early days, I had to debate them a lot, even in forums or PR seminars.
Well, let me jump in there for a second, because the other thing of that is that if you just want to get into Wall Street Journal and tell your story, buy an ad. Because if you're not going to reach the people that you think you're going to reach just because you have something in the Wall Street Journal does not mean the audience is going to all of a sudden, storm your doorways or phones to get whatever it is you have. It doesn't work like that. You need to find out people have something that they
not
want
at all
information on. Absolutely.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And what I used to tell clients, that if you want to have a perfect story in a perfect placement in a perfect publication and perfectly timed by an advertisement,
mm-hmm.
okay? But if you want to have a story that has far more credibility because it's a third-party endorsement of you, meaning the media is writing about you. You're not telling the story. The media is telling the story.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That gives you much more credibility. It also, in today's world, which we call content creation, okay, it creates credible content. So that if you have a company, and I always advise companies, now particularly in the world of the internet, that you want to have a story that has a long tail to it and so forth, then the best way to do it is through media relations, earned media, because you take a story out of for example, the Wall Street Journal or Cat Fancy Daily, I don't care what it is, and you put it in front of your audience through your social media platforms, it'll have more credibility because it's them saying things about you,
right.
not you saying things about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, it goes back to, all of this kind of goes back to the media. And I used to say it's probably blasphemous, but a client can come to you, and I don't mean this literally, but a client comes to you and says, boy, I've got the greatest story that's never been told. Okay? And what you have to say is, I don't care. What I care about is, will that story resonate with the media? Then I'm going to get you what you want. But we've got to take your facts, your figures, your sales proposition, and we've got to massage it and turn it into something that the media is looking for.
Right.
And they'll be and it will resonate with them. That's where a professional PR person or a professional media relation person, that's where they earn their money.
You know, let me add to that, because one of the things that I did when I was encouraged to start a PR firm was to get some people who really know what they're doing. And some of the people that I hired, I know a buddy of mine said, get the best person you can find. Now, even if they know more than you do, I mean, you're the boss, but get the best person you can find. So I had some top-notch people working for me who had been reporters, both TV and print reporters. And that really, really helps, because, I can write what people tell me to write, but reporters can ask the questions that need to be answered, and talk to the client. What is it that you're trying to tell? What do you want people to know? And they can write it for them. So that really was, that information when I got started was a premium, I guess is the best way to put it, because now we're just not cranking out something that, we think that sounds good. It's coming from a reporter who's getting it from our client to, tell them exactly what it is we want them to know for the case, or they want the public to know.
Well, I had people that I had hired that came out of, for example, the New York Times, and they weren't necessarily good people to place stories. They had that credibility, but what you also have to have, what you determine, is they also have to know how to pitch a story. Mm-hmm. Now, most media people know how to pitch a story because they've had to pitch it themselves internally. Okay, a reporter's got to pitch it to a senior reporter. A senior reporter's got to pitch it to his editor. Mm-hmm. The editors often has to go to a senior executive editor before that story ever sees fruition. A good big story is what I'm talking about. So in most cases, that ex-journalist knows how to do that.
Right.
Some don't, unfortunately. So you got to be careful when you hire people that say, "Hey, I spent 10 years at the Wall Street Journal." Well, can you pitch a story? Mm-hmm. And that's part of it. Most can, because they have experience doing it. Mm-hmm. I have another thing that I often say. One of the fallacies of client thinking. All right. And it's also a little blasphemous in the business, because a lot of PR firms pitch this as their expertise. And that's, we have great relationships with the media. And I used to say, why? What does that do? The media cares about is not whether you've got a brother-in-law there. Even your brother-in-law, if a brother-in-law is working at the New York Times, just because he's your brother-in-law and you're pitching him does not mean a story is going to run.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
It has to do with, is the story a good story?
Absolutely.
Does it resonate? And now even more so, because the media has been so narrowly eliminated. My God, you've got to be even more careful in pitching a story, because guess what? That reporter, that producer is running a little scared now. Mm-hmm. They're running a little scared for their job. So they can't take a chance that a story is going to be a dud. Okay? So it becomes even more important these days that whatever pitch you make to the media is going to resonate, really interest them. And what I used to say, and I still do, is Make them a hero with their boss.
There we go.
Make that reporter a hero. And if you can do all, and that has so much more to do with whether I've placed 50 stories in the Wall Street Journals, therefore I'm a good PR person. You're only, and no, I know this is terrible, you're only as good as your next story.
Mm-hmm.
You're only as good as the next one you pitch. And that takes skill, that takes experience, it takes humility at times, because you're not the hot shot you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
You got to work for a story on the media.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's changed. And a lot of people say, well, that's kind of the old days of PR. Now there's things like AI and social media and all of this and influencers and all of this. You know what? Yes. And all of it's valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still nothing over the years, and I've been in the business for over 50 years, there's still nothing like getting a story getting on the front page of the New York Times or getting on the cover of Forbes. That old traditional media where there's a magazine slapped on a coffee table somewhere is still incredibly valuable and still incredibly prestigious.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is how you use that story now. It's not just framed in a wooden frame and put on a wall in the president's office or a conference room. It's how you use it now. And now you use it through social media and through other things to really get it extended so that it has legs for maybe 6 months or a year. That's what's different. So, but the idea that traditional media still isn't valuable, no. It's still very valuable.
Agreed. Say, Dick, you have provided our listeners with some very, very good advice, solid stuff. Any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
Well, not really. Maybe it's the media stupid, but I think that's come through. I just love. It sounds corny. I've been in it for 50 years. Okay, and I love the profession. But I also don't like all of the BS that goes with the profession. I also don't like the way PR is represented in the media and in the entertainment media. We're always the bad guy. Have you ever noticed that? The PR guy is always either the buffoon or the bad guy. And we do a valuable service. And the other thing is be paid for it.
Absolutely.
And that's where pay for results come in.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's partial pay for performance, the idea of adding an incentive, I've had people work for me under retainers. I've had people work for me in hourly. Always, invariably, if there is an incentive attached to the pay, at least part of the pay, you see better results. It's just a matter of human nature.
Good. Well, Dick, let me say thank you so very, very much for coming on to our podcast today. Your experience with pay for performance and experience in terms of, how to better sell stories and get stories out there. I'm sure our listeners will have a serious appreciation for that, and thank you for that as well. And I want to say thank you again.
And I thank you. And, and you've been kind to let me know, to give me a platform, so to speak, and where people can reach me, and if they are still interested in doing things. And for that, I thank you, Peter.
Okay. Well, my guest today has been Dick Grove. I'm sure that you've enjoyed the wealth of information he's provided to you. And if you enjoyed it, please give us a review to the podcast. Share this information with your friends. And, of course, look for the next edition of the Public Relations Review podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Public Relations Review podcast. We invite you to share this episode with your friends and colleagues, and we greatly appreciate your reviews and feedback, which help us improve and grow. The Public Relations Review podcast is produced by Peter Woolfolk in the Washington, D.C. suburb of Silver Spring, Maryland. Thank you for listening, and please share this podcast with your colleagues.
Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, let me say thank you so much for being a listener. Now, I want to alert you to our shiny new podcast website located at podpage.com. However, you can go directly to the podcast site located at publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can contact me through email. You can leave a voice message. You can leave a review. You can read an episode blog and frequently learn about the podcast guests. You might also want to suggest podcast topic ideas or even suggest a guest. You can also let me know if you would like to receive our podcast listener logo that you can post on your social media. So I look forward to hearing from you about our new podcast website. Thank you so much for listening to the Public Relations Review Podcast, and have a great day.